Hello, Traveling Keto Cat here. I just got back from Belize in South America on a 10-day cruise, and I've learned so many things from this trip in particular that I am excited to share with you. So if you are considering a cruise, if you have been researching different cruise lines, if you are thinking of a different idea that you can do for the holidays, maybe for 2024 already, which already sounds like it's crazy far away because we just got done with Christmas, but cruises book up pretty fast. Or if you're just trying to think of a way to take advantage of maybe some sailing discounts, if you perhaps live in a port or close to a sailing port, then this video is for you. I would love to hear your suggestions and other ideas that you've learned along the way, but I'm going to jump into 15 things that we've learned as a family going on this most recent cruise. The caveat to this is, of course, these are all just my own perceptions based on cruising now 7 times. This is my 7th cruise that I've personally done. And a quick background story is that as a family, we generally take care of like whatever the girls need, throughout the year. And so we immediately, when we became parents to twins, we thought, we already have enough stuff, but really it's more about like the memories and the experiences together. And so we've done a cruise or a very large kind of like over the top trip every single year as a family, so that hopefully as the girls continue to get older, we get to create more memories and moments with them instead of worrying about, if they have the coolest toy or not. So again, that's just a personal philosophy that we're taking, and that is why we sailed this time from December 24th to December 30th. Last year, in comparison, we sailed from December 17th until December 29th. And there's a little bit of a difference that I'm going to get into as we jump into these 15 things that I would highly suggest you consider and evaluate if you are considering cruising, if you're booking a cruise, if you're thinking of a girls trip, a family trip. It doesn't even necessarily have to be Christmas, but so many learnings from this trip, so I'm going to jump right into it. Lines. So item number 1, there were lines everywhere. And just for context, we sailed on Norwegian this time. Last year as a family, we sailed on Princess, and I felt like there were some very notable differences, not only in the quality of service, the quality just overall, with Princess being, in my opinion, far superior, but also just the overall experience, and I'm going to jump into those. But lines were everywhere. So consider if you were going during a peak time, which are usually those times that like kids are traditionally out of like school or, those classic kind of holiday breaks, you're probably going to have a ship that is more at capacity. And so tip number 2 is understand what is the max capacity of the ship that you're going to be sailing on. For example, last year we were on the last ship or on the last sailing of a 2,000 person ship that was still only at about 40% capacity because COVID restrictions were still in place. The sailing that left on December 30th, so the next sailing right after we, got to port, was going to be up to 100% capacity. And then this year, of course, on Norwegian, our ship was at 105% capacity, which how they can even do that, I don't even know. I haven't read the fine print. I'll get to it eventually, but I know that because I'd asked 2 different people that worked for the cruise line, and I was saying there is lines for everything everywhere across this ship. Why is this so chaotic? And both of them said, we are beyond capacity. And I was like, that doesn't sound safe, but whatever. So timing has a lot to do with it. Ship size has a lot to do with it. Holiday breaks have also factor into that. Also ask about the age of the ship. So we sailed on a 10-year-old ship, which meant that about 10 years ago, Norwegian was focusing on different types of designs and things were more or less important to them as a company at that time. So for example, the atrium, which is kind of like the hub or the heartbeat of the entire ship, the atrium of this ship in particular was very small. Notably much smaller than the Princess ship that we were on. But interestingly enough, this ship had double the capacity of last year's ship that we were on. I've also sailed on Royal Caribbean, Carnival. I've done a couple cruises on Norwegian, actually. This was the worst one out of all of them. And then, of course, last year I did Princess. So we are also looking into a Viking cruise, but that's for a later video. All right, so our ship was at 105% capacity of a 4,000 person ship, which meant that there was people everywhere. If you wanted to go to dinner, you were waiting in a line. If you wanted to go to a dinner that you paid extra for, there generally was not much of a line. So some cruise lines have more of that kind of like nickel and dime approach where it's like, oh, well, if you are willing to wait, then it's free and it's included in the amount that you've paid. But if you would like to expedite it, or if you would like to upgrade the dining that you're experiencing, then you can pay, $50 per person kind of thing. Just for context, I don't know if this is taboo, but I'll go ahead and say it. For a family of 4 on a 10-day Christmas cruise, with an upgraded family balcony suite room, which was still very tiny, but that's another point that I'll get to. We paid just under, I think, $10,000. That does not include airfare, because they did have a promotion where we would actually been able to get like a buy one, get one free kind of promotion for our airfare. But the trade-off to that is that you're giving the cruise company total control over booking with whatever airline and booking you into whatever times you're going to need to be there to make sure that you can make the cruise and get off the ship on time. We didn't want, pricing wise, it worked out basically the same if we booked our own flights. And that gave us a greater degree of control. And we actually got into New Orleans about 2 days prior to embarkation, just so that we gave ourselves a little bit of a buffer, because we know we're traveling over the holidays. Things are crazy. 2 years ago, we went to Puerto Vallarta, and the airport had basically like a whole meltdown because there was an ice storm that came into Seattle, which canceled and grounded all of Seattle's airplanes leaving and coming in. And so we wanted to buffer for that a little bit of extra time during the holidays. All right. So ask about capacity and age. Ours was a 10-year-old ship, and so the atrium was much smaller, which meant that you were generally having to navigate around a lot of people, because that's like so central that everyone has to go through that area. So it just felt like continually congested, really, and it just added to the stress. In addition of there being lines everywhere, that also adding to the stress. With that in mind, another big thing that we've personally come to enjoy about cruises is that there's something for everyone. We are a family of 4. We have twin 4.5-year-old girls, and the girls are old enough now to where they really enjoy going to the kids camp. Now, last year, for comparison, we were able to take the girls, if they wanted to go, basically for a full day. There were some dinner breaks and sometimes some lunch breaks, but it was mostly like kind of, like an 8 to 5 or an 8 to 7 kind of thing. And on Norwegian, when about a couple days before we were getting ready to sail, we got an email notification giving us basically a heads up of like, hey, just telling you all that the times and hours that you're trying to get into kids camp may not be available because of how many people are going to be on this ship. So comparing the fact that that was like a big factor for us to have that flexibility, if maybe I wanted to go read a book for an hour, and like drink a pina colada and give them some time to have their own fun in kids camp, and not being able to do that really, really left a pretty negative taste in my mouth from this year's experience on Norwegian. I understand that you can't always get what you want, but if you're paying a ton of money for that to be part of what you've paid for, then that's a little different. If they would have said that from the very beginning, hey, just as a heads up, during peak holiday times or whatever, it's going to be like really first come, first serve, and not everyone will have room to get in, then we would have taken that under consideration when booking this cruise line and on this specific itinerary. So what that ended up being is that kids camp basically was open from 7 to 11 p.m. and it meant that we had to be in line about an hour before it opened. First night we got there at like 6:45, and there was a line that wrapped around a flight of stairs. And so the next night we got there around 6:30, and same thing. Everyone basically had the same idea, which was like, oh, I'll get here a little earlier. And it still wasn't early enough. And so then the third night, we got there at about 6:15. We're a little closer up in the line to where it was about a 35-minute wait at that point. But the process in which they were checking each child in my opinion, was very antiquated. It was like a lot of papers, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to me as to why kids that had already registered had to still be like a new form every single time had to be filled out. It's not like they were checking temperatures or anything like that I had seen on last year's cruise with Princess. So we basically, if we were trying to do like a 6 o'clock dinner, that wouldn't work. And so we had to eat as a family around 5 p.m. And there was the stress of, if we're trying to have a relaxing dinner, we're going to miss out on having the ability to just take our kids and get them into camp. If we wanted to like go watch a show that's like an hour long or something and they can have their hour of playtime, it's not going to work. So it ended up to the point where my partner would break off and he would go get in line, finish his dinner early, get in line for kids camp while I was finishing feeding the twins. And that was like the opposite of what we were trying to do as a family. We were trying to have, shared dinners and have fun together as a family, even though we were still trying to give them a little bit of their fun time and give mom and dad some of our own fun time as well. It just became very, very stressful. So take that into consideration with the cruise line. Perhaps ask questions around like, what's the max capacity of the kids camp? What are their hours on that ship for that itinerary for kids camp? Because again, on ours, it was only from 7 to 11 p.m. basically. I think there were 1 or 2 days where they had like a 2 to 4 session, but that was usually when we were gonna, be at the pool with the kids or doing an excursion or something else. So the 2 to 4 slot didn't really work that well for us anyway. But still, overall, much less available hours and first come, first serve with 4,000 people on a ship a little over 4,000 because it was at 105% capacity, right? Excursion timings. So another thing that was really interesting was that a lot of the excursions started and ended around the same time on the port days. And what that ended up doing is, and this is tied into the next tip, but what that ended up doing is actually creating a surge of when all of the free restaurants were just totally maxed out. Now, usually cruise lines use their buffets as like a self-serve kind of thing. People can come and go as they wish based on what fits their schedule. However, there were so many people that were coming back. Let's say, I think it was in Honduras, most excursions ended by 2 p.m. because it was a 4 p.m. Disembarkation time for that day. Most everyone was coming back to the ship between 1 and 2 p.m. The buffet was so packed that we could not find a single table to eat at. We had to do laps for about 10 minutes. And at a buffet, I've never had such craziness happen like that on a cruise ship. So one thing to consider is the duration of the port days and knowing if it's really going to be worth the trade-off of, leaving the ship for like a 2 or 3 hour thing and looking across when all of the excursions are starting and stopping to see if you're going to be part of that kind of tidal wave if you are perhaps going during a peak time. With that said, related to that, the number of restaurants on this ship was surprisingly constraining. So there was Shanghai's noodle bar that was free. There was the buffet that was free. There was Garden Cafe that was free. And there was, I think there was one more. I don't have the name of that restaurant up in front of me. And then there were about 5 to 7 paid restaurants. There was Le Bistro, there was a teppanyaki place, there was a steakhouse, there was a churrasco place, like a Brazilian steakhouse place. There was Ocean Blue, which was a seafood restaurant, and then there was Wasabi, and there might have even been more, but that alone is 7 paid restaurants compared to like 4 or 5 free restaurants. And so again, 4,000 people, majority of them trying to take the free meals. It was, again, lines everywhere. So for example, the Manhattan Room, that was I think the 5th restaurant that was free. And the Manhattan Room had like, live performers, and they had like a dance floor in the middle. It was nice, but the service there was so bad. So for example, Norwegian says that, their whole thing is dine when you want, where you want. So to have that flexibility, but the problem is that that's not really true. Because when you have a ship that it's at full capacity, it's not dine when you want, where you want. It's dine when you want with a wait, if you're willing to take that wait. So for example, we went to the Manhattan Room one night and we put our name on the list. They said, okay, yeah, maybe like 30 minutes. And we were like, cool, great. That's the best news we've had so far. It ended up being a little over 70 minutes before we were sat. And by that time, the kids, we were running into the kids camp issue because they were they were really looking forward to doing something at kids camp that the teachers had told them that night. So we said, okay, yeah, we'll try to take you. The food took another hour to arrive, and the server just seemed completely, disinterested in the fact that we're sitting there for an hour wondering where our food is. He did, I think, address us like one time and ask us if we wanted another drink, but it was pretty stressful sitting there knowing that the clock is ticking on the kids camp line, and having been there basically 2 hours and 20 minutes before we even had food. We did try to order dessert. He said that he can make the dessert come out very quickly that night. I ordered a banana Foster, and it must have like sat in the pass or something, because I know he was trying to like batch all the food out because of how many people were there. And by the time it arrived, it was basically melted and pretty gross. So again, like I think a lot of this like stems from the capacity issues and the timing going on a Christmas cruise. So the other thing to that end that I wish I would have known and really thought more about is the number of pools and hot tubs. And for example, we were on the Norwegian Breakaway, and that boat, I believe, had 4 hot tubs. Initially, when I thought about that, I was like, oh, cool, 4 hot tubs. That seems like enough, right? The problem is that there was like this very large posse of like young adults that basically would change into their swimsuits in the morning and go claim the hot tubs. And it was about 30 of them that would go claim the hot tubs in the morning and just stay in the hot tubs basically all day. And if a couple of them, broke off to go eat, most of the other teenagers were there, like flirting with each other, brewing up their awkward pubescent juices. And so it basically meant that like there was the last day of the cruise was the first time I was able to use the hot tub without having to like wedge myself in. I just didn't want to deal with the stress of trying to be like, hey, this hot tub seats 8 people and you guys have been here all day. Can one of you like take a hike? I didn't want to be that person. It's still a small ship with 4,000 people. So anyway, the number of hot tubs played into what I could and couldn't do. And again, what I was booking the cruise to be able to do for like those, small amount of hours that we were perhaps taking the girls to kids camp, being able to like chill in a hot tub with a drink and read a book was like my vision. And I was not able to really like do that. And that made me pretty sad. So just to do a quick math on it, there were 4 hot tubs that sat 8 people each, which basically meant 32 people. 32 people out of 4,000 could be in the hot tubs. Now, along those same lines, there was, I think, 2 small pools. There was a kiddie pool, and that was like a 4 feet deep pool. And then I think there was an adult pool that was 5.5. And then there was another pool and another set of 2 hot tubs that were up on deck 17, but you had to pay to belong to, I think it was like Club Spice or something like that. You had to pay to belong to that club to be able to use those private hot tubs and that private pool. And again, for how much we had already paid for this cruise, it just felt kind of like an insult, So if you're a pool person or you were thinking about using the hot tub, consider the size compared to the max capacity. With that also said, the hours of the bars seemed really weird on this cruise. It seemed more noticeable on this cruise than other cruises. So for example, there was like the poolside bars, there was 2 of them, and one of them closed at 8 and then another one of them closed at 8:30, but the pools were open till 10, but then the hot tubs were open till 11. And on other cruises that I've been on cruises where they're open, until midnight, or on certain nights they're open maybe even until like 1 a.m. And I understand that part of probably the motivation was to, redirect the staff that have been, tending the bar and like keeping the deck clean and moving them indoors as they try to start transitioning people away from, drinking outside, starting to like wind down for the night or whatever, especially because, wintertime cruising, sometimes the waters can be a little choppy and they're going to close the deck off anyway. But look at the hours of the bars and the restaurants, because basically every night we were having to manage. It just felt like we were back in regular life. You know, we had to look like, okay, well, we want to go to like the 7 o'clock show, but this restaurant probably is going to have a lot of people coming back from this excursion at 4 p.m., which means from 4 to 6, it's going to be really booked solid. So do we just want to forego this and pay an extra, $100, let's say, for 2 adults to eat at the steakhouse or something like that? But again, all those things really add up, and we're doing that as a result of the hours that we're just kind of all over the place. And so looking at those could help you minimize some of your stress. Another thing that I wish I would have considered is the casino placement. Now, a lot of these, ships, they're cruising in international waters, which means that they're able to, gamble. You can gamble on the boat, which is fun for a lot of folks that like to do that. But the problem is that on this ship in particular, on the Breakaway, it was like centrally located, and you had to walk through the cigarette and cigar smoke in order to get to like the restaurants. And it was like right next to the atrium. And so it was like, it just felt super capitalist, like, hey, we're more concerned about everyone seeing the casino and having the temptation to like gamble and smelling the smoke that's going to go now into the atrium across all levels than it is about like maybe putting it on the back of the ship, etc. And again, I understand why they want to do that, but walking through the casino every time with 2 4-year-olds, it didn't feel pretty good. It felt stressful because my kids are inhaling secondhand smoke just so we can go to dinner. So look at where the casino is actually placed, and perhaps even the size of it compared to the size of other stuff on that level. It might just give you a better indication if you're sensitive to smoke or something like that. Another thing to consider. Another thing I wish we would have known before taking this specific cruise is the level of service. So there on the Norwegian Breakaway, there were, of course, like mega suite kind of rooms, and we opted for their upgraded kind of tier service would be if you booked in what's called the Haven. We didn't do that. We booked like 1 tier below the Haven. The Haven, of course, had like their own restaurant and their own bar and their own key card protected like rooms just for people that were in the Haven. But we did have a family balcony suite room that had a small little balcony that we were able to sit out on, that had 2 chairs and just barely, could seat 2 people. Our room was about 240 square feet, and the level of service that we received for having an upgraded room, the ocean view balcony room, compared to other cruise lines that I've been on, in particular Princess, when we were last year, it felt notably different, because last year we basically had an upgraded suite room that was much larger, so we had more space. We weren't stressed out as a family of 4. But then the other thing is that we got priority disembarkation, priority restaurant service, so that, the whole dine when you want, where you want kind of thing. On Princess last year, we were able to walk up to any restaurant and they saw that, our medallion had like a different color to it. And we were always sat immediately, like it's instant fast pass kind of thing. And that was really great, especially when at that time we had 2 very cranky and emotional 3-year-old twins. This year, there was no type of perk that we really received for having an upgraded ocean view balcony room. And so if you are looking for some of those like extra perks for paying a little bit of extra money, really go through with like a fine tooth comb and compare the different cruise line, cruise ship, and cost. With that also in mind, another thing we wish we would have known is the value for those upgraded rooms. We had a room, again, that was about 225 square feet and had a pull-out couch with a bunk bed that dropped out from below this year. Last year, we had enough space to where the girls were able to like put up their own. We had like a large divided curtain that had blackout curtains that separated our sleeping area that had a king bed in it from the girls' area that had the pull down bunk beds from the ceiling, and they loved it. They also, last year's room on Princess was large enough to where they had, I think, a 32-inch TV. just in their little area with like an office desk. And we had like, I think a 48-inch TV or something that was sizable for compared to the size of the room. This year it was just one little TV. Their bed was right next to our bed. If you needed to get by to like get to the bathroom, whoever was trying to walk by at the same time had to like, you know, get out of the way, and then you went. We were just constantly bumping into each other, and so that added to the stress. So again, like looking at those types of perks that you get, priority embarkation, debarkation, disembarkation, dining time, flexibility, etc., could be another consideration. Also, another thing that was really interesting is the port that we decided to sail into and out of. So we took this cruise in particular because we were sailing out of New Orleans, and I was really excited to see a huge ship navigate all the way down the Mississippi River. And I got to see that, and I'm still very grateful for being able to see that. However, I'm sure it was probably somewhere in the fine print, but apparently once we got on the ship and we had, you know, set sail, and we were like, cool, let's have, you know, a celebration glass of champagne or something. Everyone told, you know, every drink that we were buying, even though it was free, there was still New Orleans taxes on it until we were out of the Mississippi and basically out into like the Gulf. And I understand it makes sense, but it still was a little bit of a surprise. And, you know, if I had a couple drinks, my partner had a couple drinks, we were still taxed on the value of the drink. And so each drink was between $2 to $4 or $2 to $5 actually, because we had the upgraded drink package, which is my next tip. So the, drink packages is actually something that can be a huge cost savings depending upon, you know, how much you want to drink or what types of drinks you want to drink. One thing that I did enjoy about this Norwegian cruise is that they had a Starbucks actually on board. It wasn't like, you know, a little cafe that says, oh, we serve Starbucks coffee. It was an actual Starbucks. And so that was great because I could go down and get my usual, you know, cold brew with sugar-free vanilla and enjoy my normal drinks without having to do a lot of effort there. However, the upgraded drink package did cost us about $190 per person. Now, the math that we did on that is Norwegian, I think, actually has a better upgraded drink package because you get top shelf liquor instead of it being like a cap up to $15, which is included in the normal drink package that you can have included. So what that meant is that I was able to drink $100 bottles of wine for free. So if I had, you know, let's say 2 glasses, that's $50 right there. And it was $190 for the entire 10 days to have that upgraded drink package for us because we liked the premium drinks with premium alcohol such as Grey Goose, Whistle Pig for whiskey, which was I think $35 for a pour. That added up if you use that for your old fashions and maybe you had like 2 a night or something like that. So doing the math and comparing the price limit per drink, as well as which alcohols are actually included or not included on that upgraded package when you're comparing the cruise lines is also a great way that you might be able to actually save money, even though you're just paying a little more upfront in the beginning. Tip number 14 that I wish I would have known, the technology. That surprisingly became a huge pain point on this ship. And here's why. So everything was still very manual key cardy. I really enjoyed last year's cruise. And again, like this isn't to be like team princess, even though I know that I am. Last year, having those medallions meant that I could order something anywhere on the ship and they would basically, it was like an air tag, you know? They could find me and bring me that drink that I'd ordered through the app, and the app actually worked. The Norwegian app I've had a lot of issues with prior to the cruise, to the point where I had to like go on the website on my computer instead of using the app, even though they're, you know, pushing, oh, download the app, download the app. The app did work, but it also fried my battery, even though it was in airplane mode. Which meant that the tech that they had built on that was probably pretty low end, but I digress. So the technology on the Princess using the medallion also meant that having those medallions on, you know, as a wristband, when I walked by one of those boards that was like, you know, where are you or whatever, it would it would change and be like, welcome, happy birthday, because we were there only a week or two after my birthday, and that was really cool. So the technology, again, like with the kids camp check-ins, or even just how they were seating people in restaurants, or the lack thereof, actually became more of a pain point than I had initially estimated. And tip number 15 is just getting an overall sense of like, what is more or less important for your family or for yourself. Are you okay with perhaps okay food, not great food, but like really great shows that are like Broadway level? Are you okay with perhaps going out on a less expensive time of year, but the itinerary might not necessarily be as cool? Or like a repositioning cruise. All those types of things play into what you probably want to look at booking. And also negotiating, I think, is something that we should have done this year and we didn't. Last year, when I took care of taking the booking on, I called and had an actual, sailing specialist. And he was really great, because I would say, hey, has anything changed? I'm looking at this cruise on Viking. The itinerary seems to be the same, but it's actually like, $800 cheaper, all things in. Is there any flexibility that you have, or any new promotions? This year, I didn't receive a single piece of communication except for basically like an email saying, oh, just, heads up, you need to make sure you bring your passport. Versus on prior cruise lines, I was always getting like email updates of like, hey, this is a reminder of like, this is a restaurant that you can look at, etc. Now, granted, Norwegian did put a lot of push notifications into the app, but messages into the app, but you would have to go into the messages and then read them. And it was all just like, book your next cruise while you're on board kind of stuff, versus Norwegian, and I think Royal Caribbean did this too, leading up to the cruise. If you were 2 weeks out from disembarkation or boarding the ship, they would say like, hey, you're 2 weeks out. By now you should have da-da-da and da-da-da. So again, just those little things that kind of add up. And for us, I think we're willing to perhaps have a boat that has less people on it, even if it means taking a different time of year off our kids. But it's more about, like, for us, what we're doing together and how we're doing it. So overall, I'm probably done with sailing Norwegian. Ask these types of questions and call and talk to people, the booking agents, like on the phone, or a travel agent, because they can still help you with those types of things too. If you do have any questions or other suggestions that you would also recommend considering before booking our next cruise, let me know. Otherwise, some other cruise lines for maybe, I don't know, 2024, 2025. So if you find anything that sounds really fun, hit me up, let me know, put your suggestions in, and I will talk with you later.